Hello. I'm so excited to talk about what I've been reading recently and what I actually just finished today. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. So in this little part, I'm going to be going through parts 1 and 2. So there's 4 parts total, but I felt like I wasn't going to be able to cover all 4 parts as kind of in-depth. It's not going to be a full, academic summary of them, but as much as I wanted to go in depth with them, I didn't feel like I could do that in however long it's going to be. I feel like it's going to be like an hour long if I end up doing it like that. So I didn't want that, so it's going to be in 2 parts. So this part will have part 1 and 2. The next part will have parts 3 and 4. That's how I want to do it. So I did prepare myself a little bit. I wrote down, took some notes, some of the main parts, then part 1, part 2, and then a little summary that I came up with for both of them, for both parts 1 and 2. Just wanted to preface, this is the Penguin Classics version that I read. I think I got it on Amazon. No, I didn't. I got it in Barnes & Noble for $9. I had never heard of it before. I think they did make a movie adaptation a while ago, but I never heard of it, and I picked it up because I saw it was the Penguins Classics, and I've been trying to get into those. And I picked it up, and I read the back of it, and I was like, let's do it. Why not? I'm going to preface this. But reading the back was like a fourth of what the book actually was. So just wanted to start by saying that. But to actually get into the book, I have a few general things that I want to talk about before actually get into part 1, talking about part 1. So when you're just reading it, you'll notice that all of the nouns in the book are capitalized. And as someone who has really read more modern, and then like last 150 years, I've read a lot of fantasy and stuff like that, classics, but they've been relatively more recent. Reading this, which was published in 1726, I had never really seen that before, and it actually took me an embarrassingly long amount of time before I realized that it was the nouns that were being capitalized. I actually think I was like in part 3, and I was like, oh, it's not just random words, it's the nouns. So hopefully you don't make that mistake that I did, that I was very confused for a while. But once I figured that out, it made a little bit more sense. Obviously, like I said, it's in 4 parts. The journey takes place over roughly 15 years, maybe closer to 16 or 17, but we'll just round it to 15 because it's a nice sounding number. So 15 years for the journey. And in that time, I think another important thing to note is when you're reading it, there's a lot of names. There's a lot of names, places, and languages. Obviously, it's all written in English, but there's a lot of different obscure names, I would say. Abstract names maybe is a little bit of a better word for it. But I would recommend, if you don't really remember words that aren't specifically like super easy English words, I would recommend writing them to the side, keeping a note on them, so you kind of can keep track of them. Other than that, I think that's about it. I did have one other thing in there, but as I was thinking about it, I was like, you know what, I should include this in part 3, not in part 1, or not with parts 1 and 2. I mean, in the next video, I'll cover that. Oh, I guess this book, I don't want to explain this. It was written by Jonathan Smith in the real world. So you take the real world. And then in the fictitious world of Gulliver's Travels, it is written by Gulliver's cousin, whose name's Simpson. That's all we're given with him. And he writes the story based off of a manuscript that Gulliver gave him. So that's not what actually happened. That's just what happened in the book. It was written by Jonathan Swift. So with that, I believe I can actually get into part 1 now. So part 1 is A Voyage to Lilliput. And it starts out with a little bit of Gulliver's background. So he went to college at, I believe it was Emmanuel College, which is kind of in Cambridge. And he went there for medicine. Now, it's not like explicitly stated that he went for medicine, but if you're kind of looking at it later in the book, he goes on a lot of voyages, obviously, and serves as a medic on the voyages, or a doctor his ship doctor. He went on a few voyages in his early career, and then eventually he went on one, which is where our story begins. So he went on one, and they were sailing along, and they saw a big boulder. They describe it as a rock, but obviously it was large enough that it split their ship in half because they completely ran right into it. Apparently a gust of wind blew them. So their ship splits in half, and it's inferred that all of the crew dies, except for Gulliver. Gulliver is still living, and he is either, drifted to shore, swims to shore, whatever. He sees an island, he goes to the shore, and once he gets there, he just collapses. He's exhausted. The man's he's almost died, so of course he's out. He's passed out. I don't really remember exactly how long he's out for, but he wakes up, and he is strapped down. His arms are covered. There's a few over his torso, and his legs are tied down. Now he's in Lilliput. That is where he ended up. And Lilliput is a island that is inhabited by people who are 6 inches tall. That's about that tall. It's about the size of my head. Maybe even a little smaller than that. So very little people. And Gulliver, we'll say he's obviously our size. He's a normal size human being. We'll say roughly 6 foot. So he's 6 foot. He's got these 6-inch little people who have tied him down. He's very confused. Skipping a little bit, because obviously I don't want this to be 4 hours long if I were to go through an in-depth description of every single part of the book. He's in Lilliput. There's a bit of a language barrier. They don't understand each other, but he goes back. He's transported to the main city of Lilliput. He learns the language. He stays there for a little bit. He meets the royalty. He helps the royals out. And everything is pretty okay until he's asked to help with a war. So Lilliput is an island over here, and then about 800 meters across, there's another island called Blefuscu. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Blefuscu. And they're at war with one another. I don't know why they're at war. I think something to do with like an egg being thrown. Really stupid. They're at war with each other. And Gulliver, obviously the Blefuscu inhabitants don't know that there's this giant man that the Laputians have. So in their next raid, the Laputians send Gulliver to meet the ships that are coming. He seizes the ships. I think he just sends them back to where they came from. I don't think he captures anyone. And that was one of the issues that the Laputians had with him. They were upset because they wanted Gulliver to capture them and to take them as war prisoners, basically. And Gulliver didn't want to do that. So after that, how he was viewed kind of by the Laputians and the royalty went downhill. And eventually he was they basically kicked him out. They kicked him out of Lilliput. And they gave him a few other reasons. Basically, one of them was going against the government. I think that was the main reason why they kicked him out. But they also gave the reason that he was going to cause a famine with how much he ate, because he would eat so much. And everything on Lilliput, the island, was to the size of an average Lilliput. So the crops were only maybe that big. So if you have someone who is 100 times bigger and you're feeding him with crops that are this big, you're going to run out of food for your country. So they kicked him out because he was going to cause a famine. And then another thing he did that they weren't really super pleased with, and I don't know anyone who would be pleased with it, one night the Empress's apartment building caught on fire where she was staying, and they couldn't put the fire out. They were obviously throwing these very minuscule little buckets of water at this building, and it wasn't doing anything, obviously. So Gulliver gets up and he walks over, and it was after a night of drinking, and he hadn't gone to the bathroom yet. So he gets up, and mind you, the building, like I said, everything on Lilliput is to the size of the Laputians, who are only 6 inches tall. So the building, in all reality, is probably only 1.5 feet high, maybe 2 feet. So Gulliver, being about 6 foot tall, he peed all over it. He peed all over the apartment building to put the fire out, which left a very bad smell. And they actually, later in the chapter, there's a section that says they actually evacuated that whole part of the city and deemed it as uninhabitable after he did that. So they weren't too fond of him after that, but he did save the Empress. So they kicked him out for those 3 reasons. And after that, he left, and he actually went to Blefuscu for a little bit, did some stuff there, and then went back home to England. And that's the end of part 1. I thought it was pretty good. It's all right. And that's what I read on the back. That is what this says. It's what it described. That's why I picked the book up. So I'm like, oh, where is it going? So in part 2, it's called A Voyage to Brobdingnag. Here we go. So he goes on another voyage, because what could go wrong? Personally, if I had gone on a voyage and I was strapped down by little people, I'd think I was losing my mind. And I would stay at home after that experience and probably go insane. But Gulliver doesn't. So he goes back out for another voyage. A few years later, he's asked to go on another voyage. And they got in a really violent storm. And the ship was blown way off course. And they end up seeing a landmass. So they go up to it with their ship. Gulliver gets off to go, and I don't know if it was just kind of go explore it, or if he was going to go try and find like fresh water for them. He goes off a little bit, and he looks back, and the ship is taking off. The ship is going without him on it. So he runs after the ship as it's going. Then he sees why the ship is going, and it is because a giant sea creature, as he calls it, he doesn't know what it is yet, is following them. So after that, he hightails it back because he's scared out of his mind. I would be too. So now he's depressed, basically. He's really unhappy because he thinks that was his ship. He's never going to be able to get back to England to his wife and his children, his family. So he's just upset. He lays down in a cornfield and he's just lamenting over his life and how miserable he is in the moment and how he's never going to get back. He sees a giant come forward, go back, and come back with a bunch of other giants who have farming size. I believe that's what they're called. I'll put a picture of them somewhere. And right before, they're going to harvest the crops. Right before they do, use it, he screams because if he doesn't make some sort of noise to let them know that he's there, he's going to be cut in half. So he screams, they look down, they see him, they pick him up, they're kind of looking at him and they're, confused. They can't, there's a language barrier, they can't understand each other. And eventually, picking him up, puts him in his pocket, takes him to his master's, farm master. That's just what he's referred to as. Takes him there. Again, long story short, I'm not going to go into all the details. He lives with the farm master's family for a little bit. He starts to learn the language by just kind of pointing at things, and then they'd say the word. And so he learns the language that way. He almost dies a bunch at that house. He was attacked by rats one night, who are like monstrous rats, obviously, because similar to Lilliput, everything in Brobdingnag is to the size of the people. So the rats aren't the little rats that we're used to. They're huge things that obviously could very easily kill a person of Gulliver's size. He's also almost killed when the farm master's son picks him up and kind of squeezes him too hard. Again, another relation to Lilliput. He's taken to royalty, and he's actually sold by the farmer, the farm master. He's sold to the royals for, I think, like £1,000. And he is taken care of by the queen's daughter, who is named, I'm really trying with these pronunciations. Glumdovich? Glumdovich? Something in there. We're going to call it Glum, just for short. So he is taken care of by the Queen's daughter Glum. And again, he also faces a near experience with death in the royals, and within the care of the royals, when a little person, dwarf as it says in the book, who is actually 30 foot tall. So imagine that, a little person who is like 5 times the size of an average, person. Who's very upset with Gulliver because previously the little person was very popular because he was the smallest. And now Gulliver, who's a fifth of his size, is overtaking, popularity around the kingdom, and he's upset. So he tries, at one point he throws him in like pudding, tries to drown him in pudding, but he just swims out and does other stuff like that. He stays in Brobdingnag for a while. He's taken care of by Glum. But eventually the two of them get sick, both Glum and Gulliver, and to get better, they wanted to get some fresh air. And now at this point, Gulliver's been there for about 2 years again, and he's ready to go home. But he can't because he's just this big, and what would he do to get home? So he wants to go to the coast. So he convinces Glum to take him to the coast and to just let him get the fresh air while he tries to think of a way that he can get out. While he's thinking, I don't know what Glum was doing. I think she was off doing something else, not paying attention. He's picked up by a bird and is taken out into sea and is dropped. So now he's like, oh crap. What am I going to do? I'm going to drown. Either I'm going to drown, I'm going to run out of food, or I'm going to die of thirst. So again, he's desperate. He wants to get saved. And eventually he does. By luck again, a ship finds him, a ship of people his size, normal, 6 foot stature. Find him, pull him in, get him up, and he's telling them what he's been through and what he was doing on that island, and they think he's, crazy, because why would anybody believe that there were, if I walked up to my family and said, or walked up to someone and said, yeah, I was just on an island full of 60-foot people, and I was dropped in here in this little box by a bird who is quadruple, the size of, a cat. Yeah, they wouldn't believe me either. So I think he's insane. I think he's going through something. The guy was left at sea. So they take him back to England, and that's where part 2 ends. So a little summary, that's the last thing we'll get to. A little summary of the two is basically they're opposites of each other. This is from what I took from the book, from parts 1 and 2. They're opposites of each other. In part 1, you have Gulliver, who is the giant, and you have these Laputians, who are smaller. I think a key point that I wrote down here was, at first Gulliver seems superior. He has power if he wanted to use it. See, these little Laputians, they're 6 inches tall. If Gulliver really wanted to, one, swipe with his hand, and he's just taken out a whole bunch of them. But he doesn't. And then in the next part, when he goes to Brobdingnag, he's kind of the inferior. And the giants are, they can do what they want with him if they wanted to. Yeah, that's my summary. Those are my thoughts on parts 1 and 2, kind of my summary, and then a few of my ideas that I came up with of Gulliver's Travels. A little bit later, I'm going to go through parts 3 and 4, because part 3 is, I think, actually one of my favorite parts. Either part 2 or 3 are one of my favorites. I'll have to kind of go through and think on that and report back. But yeah, I will have that up. I'll have that going at some point in the next few days. But overall, it was a really good read. I enjoyed it. Don't know if I'd read again, but it was a fun story to go through. So those are my thoughts on it. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my rants. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to, talk about books. Yeah, if you're interested in the next part, go ahead and stay on the watch for that. It'll be soon. And thank you for watching.